Welcome to the SparkCom podcast, where we talk about trends, innovation, and what's coming next. I am Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
How are things with you, Adam?
They're great. We've got a beautiful 70-degree day here in lovely Las Vegas, Nevada.
Great. Well, the weather's very nice here as well. Part of one of the good things of living in the desert is we enjoy these amazing winters. And speaking about Las Vegas, I wanted to talk about an innovator, since this is Innovation Week, Innovator Week, or Innovator Month, really, about an innovator that was prolific in doing lots of amazing things. He did a lot for Las Vegas and actually recently passed away, and that is Tony Hsieh. So let's talk about Tony. I know that you followed him for a while. I certainly did. I saw him as a very progressive and really a true innovator in what he was doing. So let's start the conversation there, Adam.
Well, the one thing I really hope is that we can focus on Tony Hsieh as an innovator, and that will dominate the discussion of his life. He did a few controversial things in his life. He put up some management programs that were unprecedented. You could pick your own title. That was very controversial. And now there's some things coming out that are controversial about his death. But I hope what we can really focus on is the innovations that he did that drove the internet. If you went back and you think about where the internet was 25 years ago when Zappos was founded, you had Amazon was still just selling books. That's all they were doing at that time, right? It wasn't the monolithic company that sells everything we know today. And the real situation was when you bought something online, you got it and it was yours. There was no two-way to it. It wasn't like you could return it to the store. You bought it, it was yours. Trying to send it back was impossible most of the time. Trying to get your money back was impossible. You often paid freight to get it to you, and you paid freight to return it if you did get them to agree to take it back. Economically, it was just not a good thing. You had to be really confident what you bought, and that was not good if you're selling shoes. Because nobody knows how the shoe what's it going to look like on my foot? Is it exactly the color that I'm seeing on the screen? Will it match my dress? Will it be comfortable when I put them on? Can I wear these all day and feel comfortable in them? Especially for ladies and ladies' shoes, which are both high fashion and a comfort element. There's a reason they would spend a lot of time trying to select the right shoe when they would go to a shoe store. And here you had this thing online. Well, how would you know? When you're looking at a little picture of it on the computer, how would you know if you wanted it or not? And it was Zappos that really pioneered this idea that you could buy the shoes, try them on, and if you didn't like them, you could send them back. And what that did was it changed the internet. It changed the way people thought about how you had to sell and market on the internet. And of course, other companies that became very successful caught on to these ideas. And now we do see the internet and buying online and e-commerce as being a two-way street, equal to, in most instances, what you would have if you went to a traditional brick and mortar. But it was Tony Hsieh who came up with that innovation. And what I like people to remember is how he did it. He didn't come up with that innovation by thinking about his value delivery system. How do I optimize moving products? That's what was happening over at Amazon. That's what Jeff Bezos was doing up in Seattle. He was getting really good at optimizing shipping and sending things out and lowering the cost. Tony really got to know his customers. He thought about the needs that the customers had. He didn't say, how do I push them to use my value delivery system? He said, what do they need and how do I change my value delivery system to meet them? And it was with that kind of thinking like his customer, thinking like the needs of the customer, that he went forward with the Zappos program, which said, buy these shoes, try them on. You don't like them, send them back. We'll give you a full refund. You're not going to pay the freight either way. Try them on, wear them for a day, wear them for a week. If you don't like them, send them back. Get them in 3 sizes. Send back the ones you don't want. Boy, to the internet people at the time, that just seemed crazy. The logistics people hated the idea. The tech people hated the idea. And most of the marketing people didn't know how it would ever work, right?
Yeah, what I like about what he did is that he truly got out of the box and thought about it.
He did.
If you're still in the box, your idea would have been like, well, you just can't do anything about it. You just, maybe we'll have another return policy. But he literally said, we're going to re-architect this whole concept of the relationship between the company, Zappos, and the consumer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he made customer service something that people could enjoy. At that time, if you remember, this is when we went through the great Indian outsourcing of customer service. And you had Dell and you had Microsoft and almost all your big tech companies were putting their customer service in foreign countries. And India was by far the leading country for that. And people were very unhappy with that level of customer service. They often had language barriers, not that they didn't speak English, but they couldn't understand accents very well, mispronounced words from the American ear. And they didn't feel like they were understood. They would try to have a conversation, and because of the colloquialisms we would use in America, the conversation would break down. Yeah. Tony Hsieh said, forget that. My customer service people are in Las Vegas. We're going to listen to the customer. We're going to have our people, when they talk to customers, identify with the people. And it always sounds simple, put the customer first. But what Tony was doing was he was saying, what are their needs? What do they really need? And how do I get them to trust me? Because this is a brand new fangled value delivery system, this internet. And people didn't trust it that much. They worried about their credit card being stolen. They worried about not getting their money back. They had all kinds of worries about that 25 years ago. And what he said was, I've got to win their trust, and I got to get in their heads to do that. And then I'm going to build the value delivery system that'll make that work.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And, when we talk about innovations going in one direction, that's a quintessential example. Because today we think about, looking backwards, the day before Zappos, now even to return stuff on Amazon and other major suppliers, it's all been smoothed over. And really what he did is not maybe to the same level, but at least to a pretty significant level. And what he did is he opened the door. And that's, I think, what innovators do is they open the door, and they might be the first one to go through the door, but ultimately they open the door for everybody else. And this is something else we talk about is you can't just do it once. You can't open the door and expect to have success forever. You've got to keep on opening doors.
Right, right. And what I'd like to do is now take a moment to contrast Tony Hsieh with another innovator that died in the last week. And that's a fellow by the name of Frank Carney. So that name's probably not nearly as well known among the folks out there, but Frank and Dan Carney founded Pizza Hut. They founded it in 1958 in Wichita, Kansas. And what made this a really great innovation is you have to go back to that period of time, go back 60 years ago. And what was, at that time, pizza wasn't the kind of pervasive product it is now. Pizza was still pretty much a product that you bought in an Italian restaurant. It was sold in Italian communities. And here were these two guys in Wichita, Kansas, they opened up a pizza shop. Now, to do that, what they had to do is they had to figure out how to make a pizza that people in Wichita, Kansas wanted to eat. And they did two really major innovations. The first major innovation was to continue to work on the recipe for the pizza to get something that the vast majority of people would like. So instead of saying the pizza needs to be like the pizza I had in Rome or the pizza I had in Napolitano or some Italian ancestry, they said, what would pizza mean to somebody in Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Atlanta, Georgia, places where pizza was not nearly as prevalent as, say, a New York City or Long Island, someplace like that. So the first innovation was to say, don't get tied to your product as it exists, but rather say, what do the customers need? And they saw pizza as a convenient product that you could make, people could enjoy, low cost, affordable for college students, that kind of thing. But they had to work on that recipe. And it took them a few years to get the recipe that would work. And one of their big, great innovations was being able to define what pizza meant. For 80% of Americans, when you get into the 1970s and early 80s, for 80% of Americans, when you said, what is pizza? The definition, the benchmark was a Pizza Hut pizza. It wasn't the Sicilian pizza or as I said, the Roman pizza. That was innovation number one. And that's pretty innovative because, to really sit down and say, I'm going to throw away the recipe and keep redoing what more people would enjoy, that takes a lot of thoughtfulness. It really does. The second thing was they sat there and said, how would we grow this? And at that time, you had most people that had those kinds of restaurants might have 1, 2, or 3 in a town, maybe even a few more if it's a big city. But the only people that were really doing franchising was McDonald's. It was at that same period that we saw McDonald's and White Castle and those hamburger chains, and later on it was Kentucky Fried Chicken. This again occurs in that early to mid 1960s era, where we start seeing the concept of franchising coming out. Now, the nice thing about franchising hamburgers is that they're all the same, right?
Yeah.
The nice thing about franchising fried chicken is it's all the same. One thing about pizza is they're not all the same, right? You have all kinds of different toppings. You can have different levels of sauce. You can have 30, 40 different toppings arranged in different sorts of configurations.
Yeah.
And tastes vary. In places like Ohio, they put pineapple on pizza. You know, if you went down into Texas, they wanted to put barbecued meat onto a pizza. So you had these variations. How could I franchise a concept like Pizza Hut, which would have consistency that customers want, and it would have a taste that people want, and yet allow for regional variation? And that was the second big innovation that the Carneys came up with in Pizza Hut, and allowed them to grow it. So that by the time we get into the late 1970s, they had something like 1,400 restaurants across the country, and they were selling about $1.9 billion worth of pizza in 2020 dollars. So it was a very, very big success when Pepsi came along and bought the company. And these two guys out of Wichita, Kansas, had created the modern pizza business, which has now got all kinds of variations to it. There's a lot of chains out there. They've all been successful, but they really birthed that. And it was, again, getting and thinking about what the market needed and delivering what the market needed and putting that first, and then building the value delivery system that would make it happen.
Yeah, I remember growing up, that's the pizza place, right? There was a Pizza Hut in my hometown, and it was a whole thing. We'd jump in the car, we'd drive down there, and we'd order 2 pizzas. It'd take about 30 minutes to get them out. And in the meantime, we would drink lots of soda from those red cups.
Red tumblers, yeah.
Yeah, and then the little tiny ice. And then there was a salad bar there as well. And then there was video games. So it was a big family experience. I mean, we'd literally spend an hour and a half there. And really, that was the definition of pizza for, I guess this would have been in the early 80s, mid 80s for me. But I'm setting it up because I know that there's been some changes. And where are we now?
So unlike Tony Hsieh. So Tony Hsieh, when he sold Zappos, he stayed with the company and kept innovating. But the second thing that Tony did was he took this level of innovation into his hometown, which was Las Vegas, Nevada. And he said, what kind of innovations could we do? And he rejuvenated what they call downtown, or the Fremont Street experience. There's some different references to it, but it's where the older part of Las Vegas was becoming dilapidated to the point that the old city hall was falling down. He bought the old city hall, he converted it into Zappos headquarters, and then he started to put in place a lot of programs to attract people to the downtown area. There's a place to both have entertainment and a place to work and live. And so he brought those innovations forward, and he kept innovating. This is where Frank Carney didn't quite get it. So after the Carney brothers sold their business for several $100 million to Pizza Hut, they were, of course, very, very wealthy men living in this very small town of Wichita, Kansas. So the world's their oyster, right? Let's go pluck some pearls. And Frank Carney goes out and starts saying, wow, I was so smart. And he starts cherry picking where he's going to make investments. So he would see a restaurant concept. He would say, oh, that looks interesting. Give him $5 million. Or he would see an oil and gas situation. He would say, oh, I see some tricks in the oil and gas business where people are avoiding taxes. Let's put some money into that. Oh, here's a real estate development over here. That looks like it could be a fun thing to do. What he didn't do is he didn't ever sit down and say, what is it people are looking for? What is the customer value proposition in these businesses? So he kept making these investments until we get into the 1990s, and he's broke. He'd spent all of his money poorly investing it in all these other businesses. What did he do wrong? Well, I mean, here when he built Pizza Hut with his brother Dan, they were very, very careful to think about what the market needed. What did customers want? And build a value delivery system that would get into that or deliver that. What happened with these other investments was he lost sight of what's the value proposition. And he would get enamored with value delivery systems. And he would say, oh, that looks like a nice trip for real estate. That looks like well, that's a neat little idea for how we might serve eggs in the morning. Those kinds of things. And he kept investing in these value delivery systems, but because they didn't really offer a great value to the end use customer, they didn't work out. And so the investments he put in were spent, the value delivery system was improved, but it didn't deliver enough value to the customer to be long lasting. The business has failed and he lost all of his money. So it's once again contrasting and thinking about, oh, what happens, with innovators, and where do innovators put their mind? You have to start saying every time you innovate, the first time and every time, you have to put the customer first. You want to, if you go out, you want to go out like Tony Hsieh with people thinking, wow, what a great innovator. Everything he touched turned to gold. You don't want to go out with, oh, that was the guy that had the great idea 40 years ago and he never quite ever got another one again. Final footnote on Frank Carney. After he was broke, not knowing what else he could do, he became a franchisee for Papa John's. And he went back to basically making pizza again. And he built another company up that had 130 franchises, Papa John's franchises. And he did a little bit in terms of helping Papa John think about how to do what we call new concepts of a brand in the restaurant business, meaning how do I put this into a shopping mall? How do I possibly make it available for delivery? Could I put one in an airport? Those were concepts or variations on a theme. They were alternative value delivery systems that still fit within the brand. And that was how he finished out his career. He did not become ever as wealthy again as he had been originally, but he certainly did regain his face, he regained his voice, and he rebuilt a business of some sort again. And but let's just keep in mind, the real money he made was when he had the customer first all the time.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Sometimes we talk about, we talk about this a lot, value and value delivery. And it's not that you shouldn't look at the value delivery. It's not that it's not important, because it has to be there as well. But I think when we focus on it, we lose sight of the original value. And like you said, what does a customer truly, really want?
Right. And so I want to tie it to one more current event, Tony.
All right.
And Manny, I'm sorry, Manny. And that is this week, the Uber announced that it is going to spin out its autonomous car business, the making, the design, the main manufacture, all the stuff they have related to autonomous vehicles. They're spinning out into another company called Aurora, and they're taking it out of Uber. Now, what does this have to do with the other two stories? One of the problems I have with Uber is it's not clear that they know their value proposition, right? And in a very real way, they've gotten all tied up in this value delivery system, driving cars, dispatching cars, sending cars around the place. And so they had this great idea. Oh, what if the cars didn't have to have drivers? Why did they do that? Because drivers cost money. So if we didn't have to pay for a driver, we had an autonomous car, lower the cost of operations. Oh, that would be great. What have we done? We didn't ask the customer if they wanted an autonomous car. We didn't ask, Manny Turan if he wants to have a self-driven car pick him up and take him to the airport. What we did was we said we want to lower our cost. So we pour $1 billion into trying to make an autonomous car, not because we won't see where it's going to go for the marketplace, but because we're focused on our value delivery system. It becomes a morass, right? It's not as easy as people think to do. You probably remember, Manny, when they had the accident in suburban, I think it was suburban Phoenix, where one of the cars hit somebody and killed them, right? Yeah. It was, that's certainly a blight. It indicates there's a problem with the product, right? And so they had legal problems, they had technical problems, and finally Uber just says, okay, that's it. We're going to spit it out. What was the problem? Again, what's your value proposition? What's your value proposition? If you're Uber, the challenge now for the guys in Aurora is going to be to take their eyes away from what they have, which is some level of autonomous driving, and start to think about what's the value, where's there a need, and then figure out if this value delivery system, this autonomous car, can fit into it. I happen to think that there's going to be a lot of use for autonomous vehicle operation, right? It's kind of like the PC. There was a lot of uses for it. So get them made, and then people will have a lot of uses for them. But you're not going to get there by just focusing on the PC. I mean, look at what happened to Dell. Look at what happened to all the PC manufacturers, right? All of them got good at making PCs, but I mean, nobody made any money to speak of except Microsoft, because they had all the software money. And the hardware guys hardly made anything at all. Most of them had near no margins. And then as the business got smaller, they went out of business and that went away. And of course, Dell's an entirely different company now, been through 3 or 4 reorganizations and really isn't a PC company anymore. And that's because they tried to build a business around the value delivery system. So I don't think Aurora is going to survive as an autonomous car or an autonomous technology company, because that's a technology looking for a market.
Right.
The way you succeed as an innovator, first understand the market and then build the value delivery system.
Right. I think the founders or the leadership of Aurora needs to make some very tough decisions. And, when we talk to customers, that we've talked about this before, it's kind of a double-edged sword. If you ask your existing customers what they want, well, what are they going to tell you, Adam?
They're going to want it better, faster, and cheaper.
Yeah. So really, they've got to get out of that box again and think about who truly needs that sort of a service. For me, what does Uber mean? It means convenience. Number one, convenience. I can have an Uber come to my office here, pick me up, and they'll be here in 5 minutes, and I'm home, and I don't have to worry about anything. For me, having a driverless vehicle pull up, I'd be personally afraid to jump in the vehicle. I mean, just now, we're not quite there yet. But for those in Aurora, there's other potential services that they could do for other maybe delivery, right? Regional delivery of bulk goods. Maybe the newspaper route. I don't know. Could be other things. I mean, that's another dead industry. But what can they do that wouldn't be tied to the existing customer base that Uber has?
Right.
That's the true innovation, whatever that might be.
Right. I mean, if you think, I can think of a lot of applications. Let's take, for example, trucks on the highway. The number one risk of a truck on the highway is a driver falling asleep, right? It's long, long hours on a 4-lane highway driving. And so if you have a human take the truck from the loading to the interstate, and then you put it on autonomous, let it go for hours and hours, because on the highway it can slow down to 50 miles an hour. It could be very, very safely operated on a highway, with plenty of sensors around it. And then it stops at some point, and the human gets in it to take on the more difficult challenge of driving into a place where it's going to make the final delivery. That's a good application of the technology right there. Okay. But the point is that who's going to do that? You need somebody who knows the trucking customer, right? Who knows the people that want the pickups, want the deliveries. You got to know their needs and then build that value delivery into that need. And that's the part that I still think Aurora doesn't have their hands around yet. And either they're going to have to pick and get to know some customers, or B, they're going to be sitting there saying, we're a technology company, and I hope somebody else out there figures it out. Now, if I was the guy who figured it out, I would just negotiate like crazy with the guys at Aurora, because I'd say, I know the customer. I know their needs. I know how to sell it. I know how to make it happen. All you are is a technology provider.
Yeah,
I'd get the out of them on price.
Yes. This morning, we were at a warehouse, a bonding warehouse that imports stuff from overseas. We were picking up some equipment, and I looked around. There was about a dozen bays where the semis pull up, the trailers. And I looked around at all this space that they had, and I thought to myself, this entire piece of land, this warehouse, needs to fundamentally change in the next 10 or 15 years to really adapt to what's going to happen. What's going to happen? We're going to see semis on a dedicated lane driving from Arizona to Maine, stopping at certain times. There's going to be a whole business on the refueling side. There's going to be a whole business on the maintenance side. Drivers need to be aware that if you're a brand new driver today in the big rigs, your job's going to change. You're either going to be the final mile kind of person, or you've got to figure something else out. And the writing's always on the wall, but like we talked about a few episodes back, a lot of people do not choose to follow the writing on the wall.
Right. And and I find this with an awful lot of innovators that I talk to. A lot of innovators come out of some form of technology, mechanical engineering, materials science, computer technology, biosciences. And they'll say, wow, I've got this great invention. And, it's got all these applications and all these uses, and I'm going to get rich. And I always have to point out to them, well, why are you going to get rich? Because there's all these applications. Well, but do you know the applications? Can you fund the applications? Do you know the customers? Do you know how to make your solution fit into that? If you don't, then the guy who figures it out, he's going to capture the value. He's going to capture the value of your innovation. It's not going to be you, because he's got the customer. He's got the sale. You just become a component to it. And I think this is the biggest thing that gets confusing between inventors and innovators. And while a lot of people who can think up good ideas and they can think up new pieces of technology or new solutions, they say, why is it I don't get to capture that value? And it's often because, well, you don't really know the customer. You don't know the need. So it's a lot of fun to work on the solution, But until you know that need and you know how you're going to apply it, you've just got a solution in search of a question, right? And the guy or the woman who figures out that customer side, they're going to be the ones who are going to be able to capture the value. They're the true innovators.
Yeah. You know what? In the spirit of the Innovation Month here, next episode, I would love to talk about a couple of old school innovators, one of which was massively successful, and one of which was, in the end, not so much, and that's Edison and Tesla. As a kid, I was fascinated by both of those stories, and we'll talk about it next time. But there's a wealth of information that can be even learned today by both of those stories of how they were both brilliant men, but one was able to actually take his innovations to the next level and get them out to market, including the light bulb here, and the other one died basically penniless. So that'll be a good story for next time.
And maybe we'll even talk a little about Walt Disney too, because he's a lot more like Edison than people want to realize.
Absolutely. And so I guess we'll just wind down with again talking about the course that we're going to be releasing here very soon, Think Innovation, and it really helps prepare people to understand and really change their mindset to think like innovators and learn what trends are on how to align themselves to trends.
Yeah, I mean, the course is going to give people the right direction to head. And as we're pointing out in these podcasts, oftentimes it's misdirecting your resources, heading in the wrong direction, investing in the wrong things. When you start to get yourself focused on a customer, understand the trends, understand the value proposition, then you're not going to make those mistakes. And that's where you want to be if you're going to make some money.
Absolutely. All right. Very good. Thanks for your time, Adam. And we'll be talking to you next week.
Thanks a lot, Manny.
Take care.